Now I request Professor A. Damodaran, Professor and IPR Chair on IP Management, IIM Bangalore. I request him to present his view.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Gupta. I'm Mr. Radha Mohan Singh, Honorable Minister, and Dr. Anbu Mari. Let me thank the RIS, Dr. Sachin in particular, for inviting me to this great workshop. To be very frank, he has done many things which I couldn't even dream of. I am always accustomed to sitting to the left, and he has made me sit to the right. That itself is a big transformation. And he's got me exposed to something which, frankly speaking, till I came here I was not exposed to. Thanks to this great work which I hurriedly went through, I am able to understand the contribution, the great contribution of Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay. I would say that the SDG 8 and SDG 12 are supposed to be very, very critical. One is about, as Anbu Mari mentioned, decent work and economic growth. That is 8. And the second one is about responsible production and consumption. Very interestingly poised two issues of SDG. But I would like to add a third one, which I think very typical of the United Nations thinking. They tend to separate things in their anxiety to separate things. They created an artificial divide between 12 and 11. What was the need for that? Now it is here that I see Dr. Deen Dayal Upadhyay's work to be very significant. He was against this tendency of separating things which should not have been separated, because I can read through his comments on integral humanism. So I will try to link all the three, 8, 12 and 11. Now there is a reason for that. I have a small narrative. I don't have any PPTs because I live in the post-PPT era where every day I have to do PPTs. So I thought here I'll be a little bit more informal. My story is about a village. 15 kilometers away from my home. I don't stay on IIMB campus. IIMB campus is a wonderful campus, artificially constructed campus. Everything is controlled there. I stay in the chaos of Bangalore city. Now there is a village. That village is called Mandoor. It became very famous in the last 4 to 5 years for the immense pollution problem created by Bangalore city. But my story goes back to 1985. This village happened to be the work of my PhD dissertation. So 1985, I studied the village. In 2010, again I visit the village. I see it is a complete holocaust. All the solid waste of Bangalore are transferred every evening by lines and lines of trucks waiting to dispose. And what was taken away was the common grazing lands of that village, which had about 345 acres of land. Out of 1,300 acres of the village were under common lands. And that has been destroyed. Now if you go to the village, the groundwater is completely polluted. In fact, it comes out as black water, thanks to leachate pollution from solid waste. And cattle are suffering from foot and mouth disease. The Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, which sits in the city, in a moment of guilt, they are now saying that we will supply you water. We are cutting off water. We will supply you water. So they supply in water tanks. Now what is the result? Water mafias have started functioning. Now there is a village panchayat. It's not a gram panchayat, it's a mandal panchayat system. So there is a gram panchayat which gets 10 crores of rupees every year for arranging water supply, out of which only 4 crores are spent. Remaining 6 crores, you know where it goes. So when Dr. Deen Dayal Upadhyay's comments attached to 11 SDG is read, it talks about city, village, synergies, and joint health. See the example that I am narrating. Complete violation of that idea. Integral humanism. We don't practice it at all. Now, this is a very interesting point that struck me when I was going through Dr. Pandit Upadhyay's comments on, which have been interpolated with the SDGs. The other interesting thing is, let me go back to, I completed 11, now I'm going back to the 12, SDG 12, which is about responsible production and consumption. The example that I gave you clearly indicates that the responsibility does not lie in the village. It lies of the people who are staying outside the village. So this basically again goes to reinforce the ideas of decentralization that Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya had so firmly focused upon, and that which came from the Honorable Minister from Madhya Pradesh. She mentioned the point about the importance of decentralization. All the speakers today in the morning emphasized on decentralization, but we are seeing what is happening in reality. Much, much more needs to be done. And in fact, I would even say that decentralization is a very patronizing statement. Like today morning, one of the speakers said, tolerance is a patronizing statement. First you centralize and then throw a bit of the crumbs on it. I don't think Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya would have meant that. Today we talk about distributed communities where everybody is autonomous. And Anbumozhi's circular economy will function if, with some leakages, with provisions by the community to whatever can be given to the cities around it. I'm talking of every city or township has a network of villages which are not independent, and that is precisely the problem which needs to be addressed. I'm very sure RIS would like to consider, at least in terms of what Dr. Anbumozhi mentioned, how many, in those terms of those criteria, how many of the villages in India are prone to the pressures of cities, especially solid-based dumping, and water supplies being cut off. The story of this village notwithstanding, let me come to what we understand by decent work and economic growth. Now, I must confess something, I have been trained in the Western system. I should confess, I have not read enough of the East. Not because I was in any fancy public school. I come from a place called Kerala. And here I know at least a few of them are from Kerala. We are very globalized. We study Western systems, and this is how we have been educated. Now, the point I am trying to say is, when you read Dr. Deen Dayal Upadhyay's emphasis, it is on multiplicity of hands. Now, multiplicity of hands is something which is very interesting as a concept. Multiplicity of hands, when I did my surveys of this village way back in 1984, I used to see multiplicity of hands working within the family and without the family. So villages were communities. Indian villages were communities, Indian villages were societies. And there was no contradiction between the two. As a community, they functioned together. As a society, they were socially stratified. All the production which happened, of agriculture production that happened, was a social process. But all the community events, including managing community assets, belonged to village as a community. The social stratification was forgotten, and that is how it functioned. So I would say that the other research agenda is something of this kind. How does Indian village function as a community? how does it function as a family? Not many villages are in that situation where they function that way, but I am very sure as you keep going to different parts of India, you will find that this kind of a bondage is much more strong in some parts of India as compared to the others. The third point, again, this is something which comes from collating all my memories of the past. I was influenced by a book when I used to do my survey. It is called Remembered Village by M.N. Srinivas. Now, M.N. Srinivas's book on a Mysore village and Scarlett Epstein's book on South India Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow. These were the two books that influenced me. Scarlett was Jewish, but she had a very good understanding of what Indian societies were, the caste dynamics were, and so many issues. M.N. Srinivas brought in the theory of Sanskritization not from Coorg, not based on his studies in Coorg, but from his study of this village in Mysore. The germs of the ideas of Sanskritization came from that. Anyway, my point is, armed with these two anthropological texts, I, an economist, went there and became more enlightened. I started studying the social fabric about which the Honorable Chairman mentioned. And I found that the first observation was that there was a society, village as a society, as distinct from village as a community. But more importantly, this is some point which resonated when speakers were talking one after the other in the first session. Man, livestock, and land linkage. It was an organic linkage. It did not matter which person did it, which person did not do it. And this is based on one village in Karnataka, but it holds all over India in some form or the other. Land was primary, and that is a point which the Honorable Minister from Madhya Pradesh mentioned in the morning. The idea was that livestock is not just a draft power. It is not meant to only plow. It is also meant to give manure to the soil. And therefore, the soil and the organic matter of the soil is very important. Humus is protected. Therefore, dryland farming is promoted. This was the logic. And this logic was completely, not completed, it was reinforced and in some ways changed when ICRISAT came into the picture. ICRISAT is the CGIAR Institute. Honorable Agriculture Minister would be dealing with that issue. ICRISAT came and gave a week-by-week probability estimate of rainfall. And they came to some ideas of cropping. When is it good to sow your crop? And they came up with the estimate. That was a great idea. Villagers knew it. They look at the skies, they know when the rains are going to happen. But the process was that ICRISAT said, now remove all the cattle. They are useless. But the villagers knew that, and crossbred cows were supplied, which came from the west, Holstein Friesian. And they can hardly move, they are meant to give milk. And therefore the heifers are also supposed to be not good draft animals. Now the idea was that the point which came after ICRISAT's great finding was that you remove this, go for high yielding varieties of seeds, shift your cropping pattern, and you create a more technified economy, which was not the idea of circular economy. My concept of circular economy, which I have understood, does not lie in creating waste. In the first place, wastes were not created for that to be ingested in the system. Private property resources, common property resources, these concepts were not binary divides. They were just part of the system. So what am I trying to say? All the cattle grazed in the private lands, irrespective of the ownership of the cattle. Therefore, it gave cattle droppings. Today, the Honorable Minister mentioned that cattle was in plenty because people did not realize the manure linkage, and therefore they drew them into the forest. But here it was not happening. So today, if you go there, this economy is not there. It has to be revived. It has to be revived in terms of the need to fulfill other SDG goals, especially on health. Today you are struggling to create organic systems. You have lost the system. Where will you create the organic system? There is no manure available. So this is the man, livestock, land symbiosis is very critical to Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay's thinking, especially on related to 12. SDG 12. The other thing is time. The Honorable Chairman just now took an instance of time. He told Dr. Anbumari, please observe time. आप हमको भी कहेंगे कि टाइम ऑब्जर्व कीजिए. But I am also an Indian. Or India we have an infinite concept of time, isn't it? We all believe in rebirth. So time concept is very interesting. We have a circular concept of time. Circular concept because seasons keep coming, going, again it will come back. Whereas the Western concept was time is there, but it is linear. It has to be made linear, even if it is not linear. Leibniz started that. And subsequently the ideas. Today, you know what is the blockchain system doing? They are also 10 minutes. You have to produce a block. This is a blockchain technology. We in India have a different concept. Infinite concept. It will aa jayega.